We are doing this. We're doing this today. I am really excited to talk with Carly Thornock because we have connected. I'm going to say I almost said reconnected, and I'm saying that because we're like soul sisters who have journeyed together in incarnations because we're like so deeply connected. It's absolutely freaking beautiful. We met in a mastermind about podcasting. She just had me on her podcast yesterday. I'm having her on this one today. She is a freaking treat. I'm gonna. I haven't been reading guest bios lately, but I want to read this one with Carly here because I love it so much. Carly, you are half family coach and half interior designer. Lead the home reclamation movement for those who want houses infused with brilliant humanity, wonder filled stories, and deeply rooted relationships. Your mission is to help 1 million women create houses of knowing so that the world can be fire hosed with the loving, home creating genius of soulful mothers who otherwise might be lost in the shame and insecurity of people pleasing the invisible masters of trendiness and Target aisle 12.
I want to
Oh
bring you with me wherever I go. That was
my God.
awesome.
Well, you inspire.
Oh, thank you. It's fun to hear you read that. I'm like, wow, I want to meet that girl. Hey, that's me. I really feel the same way about you too. Like, Sarah, you're the soul sister that I didn't know that I had. I'm so glad. I feel like the reason, maybe one of the big reasons I joined this mastermind is to meet you. I was telling my husband this yesterday. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I love podcasting and what we're doing. But one of the big ones was to meet you. And I feel like we almost like passed each other. I was just grateful that we landed in the same place at the same time.
I feel that way too. I absolutely feel that way too. I feel like that my having met you through that program, it completely, not that it wasn't justified already because it's a wonderful program, but that in itself justifies the whole thing. So um how
Great.
beautiful is that? Um yeah. And y'all, I felt so strongly about Carly that I hooked her up with my mentor Sean, who, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know him because we had an episode a few weeks back, and he's partial reason why I moved to Maui. And then they bonded, and she's going to have him on her podcast.
Yes, I am. And that episode was excellent with you and Sean.
Oh, thank you,
I loved it. Totally loved it. Huge takeaways.
thank you. We're going to record another one hopefully this week. Like, yeah, it's there's just so much richness. And there's going to be, and already is so much richness in this conversation right here, right now with you. And I want to open the portal of this beautiful conversation by asking you what in this incarnation right now on the planet with everything going on around us and you, what is your soul's purpose?
I love that question. Like elevates everything in my life. Like, what's the reason? Why do I do all that I do? And the reason it all comes down to me to connection and love. I just want to see people's souls and I want them to see themselves through a divine lens. I feel like when we see ourselves and see our people and even our houses, that's kind of my jam. When we see our world around us through a divine lens, we elevate, we become different people, we create more than we could ever create, just like Hodido, our own little selves, trying our best on the planet. But when we're in an alignment with source and with God and with the energy of creation, harnessing love, harnessing gratitude, that's when miracles happen. And I am all about, I'm so curious to learn. I really desire a depth of knowledge of creation.
And that, y'all, is why I love Carly so much right there. We speak the same language and we come from very different places. We come from very, very different places on paper, and yet we speak such exquisitely similar language. And what we talked about yesterday on your show, I'm going to weave that in here too, because what you just spoke to about with your soul's purpose is really sort of bringing the divine bringing the soul, bringing the divine, bringing source, bringing God into everything that we do, which to me is the very definition of ceremony, which is what I have been diving deeply into here on Maui. But weaving ceremony into everything we do. And in your case, it's everything and home spaces.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This
Can you
idea of
speak more?
ceremony,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's so beautiful, and how you talk about it is so inspiring to me. Like, makes my heart stop and the world melts away. Like ceremony, this idea of sacredness in the mundane feels like such a root purpose of living to me, to be connected downward into the earth and to be extended upward to the sky, to the ether, to God, and to live in a vacillation between the two feels like everything. And even today I was doing my dishes and I remembered what you said of what if even the mundane things were like a ceremony. And while I didn't light a candle because I have three boys under the age of 10 living with me all the time, homeschooling with me, anytime I light candles, there's like fingerprints in them and burns that happen. I figuratively like lit a candle in my heart and was like, this is the time that's sacred for me to do my dishes. And I thought of the idea of ceremony elevates everything that we do at home, all the things we put in our home, all the ways we in and out in our routines and in our rituals and traditions in our life. It just makes it so intentional. And that's the purpose. I think if we went back a million years to when traditions and all this started, rituals, we would see that the purpose of like holidays and the purpose of gatherings and the purpose of most of the things that we just accept culturally as a habit, right? Like I think that there was a deep ceremony with them that we have kind of lost the sanctity of. And when we bring that back in, everything becomes alive again, and we can really clearly choose what we want to do with our lives, what we want to do with our homes, what we want to do with our our lots, our homesteads, our existence, our relationships. Because when it's sacred, the focus becomes clear. At least for me, is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and keeping my home as a temple space that is fit for a ceremony. Ceremony isn't just like when we weddings and funerals and bar mitzvahs and whatever, whatever else is relevant in your lives, or even if you're doing a lot of going to church on Sundays and thinking of that as ceremony, that's still, it's not enough. Like, life is so actually much more joyful when you bring the
Mm.
sacred deep intention to everything you do. And shit, I'm not saying I do it all the time. I'm
Oh,
still,
nobody is.
yeah, I mean, I think that we would be like ascended masters if we could do it 100% of the time. And maybe that's in our future. I don't know. But for me, I'm some percentage that vacillates between 10 and 85 of, of the time I am in, doing my best to be in a sacred ceremony, with how I am with my child, with how I, declutter my home and pick things up around my home, how I wake up in the morning, how I prepare for bed, how I show up to my calls. Um, and it's also requires a constant reminder.
Yes. And what I love too is the in between parts. So we have
Mm.
these parts where we're intentional that feel really sacred and ceremonious already. And then there's the parts when we don't and we're human. But if we back up 10,000 feet and if we look at our whole lives as an ebb and flow of sacred and ceremony and just like regular losing our temper and sleeping in and doing the things that we don't technically want to be doing, they're not our highest and greatest stuff, whatever. As we look at our whole lives as a whole unit, as a striving, as a process and a progress, we see those very humanity infused moments as sacred. This is like raising children. When you look back and you think of the sleepless nights and you think of potty training and you think of like one time my kid was on top of the ottoman that we used as a coffee table and he just like backflopped for fun off onto the TV console and just split his head open. And I remember in that moment feeling like, why? Like, what is actually happening in your head? You're crazy. But now looking back at these moments of like, oh, my sweet little 2 year old, remember him? Like it feels so sacred to me because it's a little bit removed. And I really love exploring these moments that we might brush off as mistakes or misdirections, and infusing those with the sacred too, being like, just being a human is sacred, and it doesn't look perfect on paper all the time. It just is.
That is some profound, profound insight right there. And I think it's so important for us individually and us collectively to really embody that perspective of looking back. I mean, so many injustices have been done to us, by our ancestors, to our ancestors. So many mistakes made individually and collectively. And if we can look back, it's almost like time travel. If you can look back and say, wow, that too was a part of our unfolding. That is why we are where we are
Mm.
today. That too is part of the sacred. That too is a maybe even a shadow that now we can shine a light on and learn even more about ourselves, or whatever it is. I love that perspective, and just that very act of doing that individually and collectively can change where we are now and our future for the better.
It changes everything. It's this idea. I was writing about it this week. You read my writings. I think I emailed it to everybody, but just about having your eyes adjust to being in the dark, where we're so afraid of these shadow sides of ourselves, or the darkness that is the other 50% of our life experience, to the light. And when we go into these dark places, these pits, it's scary for a minute, and we feel like we're without input, we're lost until our eyes adjust, and then we can start to see shadows. We can like differentiate the darkness. Has this ever happened to you when you're in a dark room and you're like, I can't see anything, and then you're like, oh wait, there's the door. I can sense that the door is there, and I can see my pillow, and like there's a little bit going on. And as we get used to the darkness, we see differently, and our other senses expand, and if we look up, we see a sky full of stars, and we can only see these little gifts that come through the darkness. For the first, let's see, I've been married for 14 years, and the first 13 and a half of them, my husband was so sick with Crohn's disease, just like so sick. I didn't know if he would make it a lot of times. And looking back, he's made a radical turnaround from really embracing his center and choosing intentionally where to direct his life, and choosing like faith over fear kind of thing. But looking back and seeing this darkness, people have asked me like, oh, do you feel like it was a waste? Would you go back and change it? And I can honestly, truthfully say that I wouldn't. The stars that I've seen, the miracles that I've observed, the sacredness that comes in the silence of the abyss, it's transformed me. I have a different perspective. So all of this to say, like, as we're sojourning on the earth, as we're building our houses, as we're coming to know ourselves, even as we're like marketing and reaching out and loving other people through our gifts and talents, when we feel like it's so dark and confusing, to be still and sit in it has a lesson. We don't have to dismiss our ancestors' mistakes and feel resentful and like have to turn things around. We can like love that in the goodness that it is, and take that light and magnify it, but also like learn from the dark.
It's such an interesting metaphor that I don't think I've ever heard before, which is strange because it feels so like resonant that it feels like we should all be talking about it. But that sitting in the darkness and letting our eyes adjust to it, and then starting to see. I mean, unless you're in pitch black, but rarely we have the moon as a metaphor. We have the moon. We aren't
Mhm.
really ever in pitch black unless we put ourselves there. Um,
Yeah, ooh, that's good. Ooh.
ooh, I guess black moon, new moon. There's a little bit of that, but just for a night.
Mhm.
um, but there's almost always an opportunity to let your eyes adjust and be able to see in the dark. I love that. And just that observation, just quieting oneself long enough to be able to witness and observe that is so nourishing, to us, to ourselves, but also to the object that we're looking at, or the subject that we're looking at. So Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so curious. You're a family coach and an interior designer. You help people with their homes. Can you talk more about like what that means? What you actually
Yeah.
do? What that looks like?
Yeah, totally. So this actually dovetails perfectly to what we were talking about. So people come to me talking about like, I'm building a new house. It's going to be a lot of money. I don't want to do it wrong. And they're afraid. Usually it's this fear, insecurity. I don't know what the best choice is for me and my family. Can you help me design? Can you help me put together a layout? Can you help me with my organization or my systems? Which I can. But the way to design a beautiful house that's breathtaking and integrated and has the roots and the branches, like all the things we've been talking about. The way to do that is to look the fear right in the face and be like, why do you not think you can do this? What is the part of your heart that says I need an expert to help me create my surroundings? I think that this is a story that's been told to us that's made a lot of people a lot of money. We wait for the colors of the year to come out. We look for fashion week in Paris to see what the trends are in the furniture. Like we're all just kind of waiting for somebody to have the next big idea. But if we could take our insecurity and our darkness, our not knowing, and sit with it long enough, we'd realize, oh, I know what I like. Every day we have choices that inform us of what we like. We choose food, we choose clothes, we choose how we spend our time. And we don't need anybody else to be telling us how to make choices that are good for us. Of course, there's going to be ideas, and we want to, from an inspired place, like take inspiration from the world around us. I think that's a beautiful relationship. So, what I do is I facilitate abundant inspiration, and I do my best to help my clients tune out the inspiration that feels like a frenzied comparison trap of consumerism.
So, okay, so as you were talking, I feel like I really was starting to more deeply understand what it is that you do. Because at first I'm like, okay, so you're saying don't hire an expert to help you, but then you are the expert to help. But I'm hearing now what you mean by that. And what you mean by that is that you are the interior designer, so-called interior designer, you probably have that training that will go in and help you find it in your own soul what it is that you manifest in your home around you, because your home, your outer world, is a reflection of your inner world, right? And so how
Mm-hmm.
can we get in touch with that deep, beautiful inner world that is connected with source and divine, and have that be reflected to us in our outer world, that we have the opportunity to create and co-create?
Exactly. It's this co-creation idea that really speaks to me. A lot of us don't live alone. Some of us do, but a lot of us have other human like inputs. And the people that do live alone, there's so many other inputs around anyway, from nature, from God, from their neighbors and family and friends. Like we're never an island alone, isolated in a vacuum. And so to co-create a space specifically as a mom with children, with a partner, the home is not something to control. It's not this idea of perfection that we see pushed to us. It's not a conformity exercise. It's an exercise in like what makes my heart sing, what makes your heart sing, and how do we marry the two and dance with them together? Like how do we represent what my child needs and this sensitivity and that goal and this future self, and how do I hear God in my space and design a place that can visually, not even verbally, remind me of who I am here, who I am here, who I am here. So it becomes this like identity circle almost where our inner world creates our outer world. But then when we create our outer world intentionally, when our inner world gets off, we can use our outer world as like a crutch, as a lever.
Yes. I love, love, love that. You're hired, except I don't own a home. I move around way too much, constantly moving. But I
But even that is
love,
so beautiful.
yeah.
This idea of just like giving and taking, and I don't own a home right now either. And it's been so liberating to be able to do kind of what I want and use land and build structures and start from scratch. I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, it really is like to go into different spaces and make those spaces, or like what it would co-create with the space, not just with the other people, like my beautiful
Yes.
son, but I'm also co-creating with the space or with the so-called landlord and with the so-called or with the neighbors and with whatever other animals and forest and jungle is around me. There's this co-creation all around for how can I create the most beautiful home space. Gosh, in Costa Rica, when I was living in these places that were half outdoors, you know, with no walls, these Caribbean style homes, I'm co-creating with the bugs. I'm
Oh,
co-creating
yeah.
with the ants. I'm co-creating with the like the giant spiders, the giant bugs the size of my head in the bedroom. And you kind of have
Hmm.
to get, I know it's pretty creepy, but you kind of have to get into a co-creation mindset with your surroundings, or you're going to be in a constant battle and you're going to be constantly um, freaked out and upset. So it becomes this conversation, a dialogue like, hey, ants, I would love to be, or spider. I would love to just thank you for having me in your jungle. Thanks for having me in your space. I really appreciate it. I know I'm the visitor here. Can I just carve out this little space here to be my own little temple space? And I know that sounds crazy, but it works for me to enter into that
Yes.
dialogue as if everybody is this co creator, divine co creator of my home space, of our home space.
I think that's so beautiful. Where I am right now in the desert, this is the relationship that I have with the dust. At different times of year, it's the mice and the flies. Like it kind of gets to the point where my mom comes over and she's like, "Where are you living? It's infested with dust," you know? And to me, it's that relationship. You have to develop a relationship with the dust and the wind and the animals and everything that's going on. We are sharing this world. And if we try to draw a hard line in the sand, like that doesn't exist in nature. You just kind of come and go and flow. And so to give ourselves our sacred temples, there's things we can do, but it's less about control and more about the dance. Same with children, same with husbands, same with wives, same with everything. We're dancing together. And there's like some give and there's some take and there's this movement and fluidity versus like balancing and controlling and austere and stiff. It's this. It's more of a dance.
So beautiful. I love what you do. Do you also work with renters or do you only work with buyers?
Oh, I work with renters too. My philosophy, truthfully, is that we don't need to change anything about your home in order for you to fall deeply in love with it and to use it as a sacred temple for yourself. It's all about the work that's going on up here and the perceptions that we're having of controlling or being controlled. And and when we can tap into that sense of abundance, that never-ending stream of prosperity, we can take anything and make it yours and infuse your love into the space and receive that reciprocally.
Mm. So one way that you characterize what you do is own your home.
Yes.
So instead of like owning your home or yeah, it's own your home, which I absolutely love that as somebody who's into the sort of yogi spirituality. That just really resonates.
And the Om is such a sacred sound and a sacred part of the spiritual
Yeah.
practice that really resonates with me on a like a hearing level, on a vibration that I can hear, but also on just the idea of creating a space that the purpose is to point you back towards center, which is usually in and up. And if we create our space to represent that, then there's really nothing that can go wrong. There's bugs that can come in, there's kids that can leave toys around, there's neighbors that can drop by unexpectedly. But this sense of yoga, the sense of Om, this deep commitment to a higher and greater good means that everything is working for us and that we don't need to be stressed to try to control again. And we can and let it be and work with it.
Brilliant. How can my wonderful listeners learn more about you?
I would love to have your wonderful listeners come on over and dabble in some home spiritual creation. That's really what we're doing. So on Instagram, you can find me at Carly Thornock, and that's my website as well, carlythornock.com. And my podcast is called Becoming Home, and you can watch out for the Sarah guest show coming up soon. where we solve all the mysteries of the world, just like we did here. But
Constant,
becoming home, that's
perpetually.
probably where I am most of the time.
So cool. This really is like what you're doing, really is like, I know I feel sometimes like I'm a broken record with new paradigm talk, but that's what I'm all about. I can't help myself. But this really is new paradigm home design and home space design and life design, really, and creatorship. And I'm just really grateful for your perspective on the world and what you do in the world. And yeah, you're such a gift to your family, as far as I can tell, a beautiful gift to your family, to your community, and to all of the world. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I feel the very same way about you. I feel like as we band together in our commitment to creation and our commitment to one another, that's when we can really see some cool stuff happening, and it's already happening.
Let's do it, girl. All right. Thanks, y'all, for
Sounds great.
listening. Sending you all so much love.